This is the third day of the April 96 7-day retreat in Springwater. This is a question that has come up. Can I really trust that simply seeing or listening, simply being here is sufficient? Even though the mind gets so involved in reactiveness, judgment, self-judgment, other judgment, wanting things, imagining things, just to see all of that, is that sufficient? And that question was there too. Can I trust this? Is that to be trusted? Well, where does trust, deep trust, come from for human beings? Either it's a strong trust or belief, faith. These are sort of interchangeable words. In something one has heard, one has been taught, maybe all one's life one can't even remember the beginning of that being taught to have faith in God. To trust or have faith in one's religion, whatever the symbols may be, whatever the dogma may be, the predictions. To have faith in that, to believe in that, out of memory, knowledge, conditioning. And this condition usually connected with reward and punishment. We're told we're good if we believe. We're not good if we disbelieve or doubt. So this connection is established throughout this organism. Although there are many people who have come to disbelieve, doubt, or even abandon their religious beliefs of their youth or teenage. So it's not cut in stone, as it were. But there is another kind of trust. I use the word very little because it is so connected with trusting what I know, what I've heard, what other people of authority have told me. And that needs to be questioned. If one is into questioning, to come to the root of one's whole being. But there's another kind of trust which comes from experiencing oneself, the truth of one's whole being, one's non-division, non-fragmentation. And that everything is taken care of in that. It needs no doing on the part of the I, the me, the ego, because that, at such a moment, is in abeyance. It does not stir. The energy does not circulate in that circuit of me-ness, I-ness, ego-ness. And without that, driving and disturbing and suffering and pleasure-seeking circuit of me, my story. Without that, there is this undisturbed wholeness, seeing everything just the way it is, without judgment, without wanting it to be different. That is quiet. And out of such being, such wholeness of perception, comes action or no action, not motivated by what I want, what I fear, although what I want and what I fear is part of the whole picture, but not the driving force of right action or right no action. So can that be trusted once it has happened in one's life? Unmistakably happened. Maybe just a glimmer, a glimpse of it, a glimmering of it. I don't know. You could say, well, is trust not always a matter of me needing some reassurance? Yes, it is, because without that me circuit in operation, there is no need for trust. Everything takes care of itself. But our heavy conditioning to think of ourselves in terms of a storyline, the story of our lives, all the past events that are remembered, strung together. Not only the past added to in the present, but also a projection of it in the future, into the future, with this an urge, a deep desire to continue as I know myself or as I want to be, as I want to become. The power of that phenomenon in human lives sort of blots out temporarily the wholeness of our being, which is not a story, it is from moment to moment now. And to one's amazement, sometimes to one's shock, when it's first come upon, it needs nothing. The shocked part is the intellect that wants to make something of it. It can't comprehend it. It wants to bring it under its control, know it, conceptualize it, predict about it, or have anxious thoughts about it. We talked about it in one of the earlier talks. Somebody reporting, feeling panic struck. Where am I going to go? Is there any place to go? I may not find it. Me who has disappeared. It's amazing how with the intellect trying to grasp what is not graspable by the intellect, not even nameable, not measurable, but the intellect trying to grasp it and making theories about it, can bring about fear, anxiety about the state. Sometimes people who have experienced such dropping away of self-centered circuit, the absence of meanness, the wholeness of being, have never wanted to touch it again. Not because the thing in itself is scary, it is our ground, the ground of all of us. But what the intellect makes of it, or the discursive thinking. I may lose all I hold dear. I may have to become a monk, abandon the world, renounce. All such thoughts surfacing and dancing around, causing fear in this organism. So it's so important that we see the utter importance of understanding thought when it occurs and its power over the feeling that occurs from moment to moment in this body. Angry feelings, anxious feelings, loving feelings, pleasurable feelings, bored feelings, all of it involving thinking about oneself or remembering, maybe not even consciously remembering, maybe not verbally remembering. The body itself harbors a lot of memories. But remembering is essentially the same process. Remembering is essentially the same process as thinking and imaging. It is the occupation in a small space which has me and my story and the identification with this story, which includes attachment to the body as its center. There's nothing to be judged good or bad about, but to see what it does, to begin to recognize it when it happens. Not to take what thought and memory tells us for the absolute truth, which appears so often as absolute truth because the body is so palpably, realistically engaged in fear or anger or pleasure. So, coming back to the initial question, is it enough just to be beholding it all, seeing it all? Well, it's no trifling thing. No trifling thing to really just the seeing of it. It's not me seeing it. It is the seeing, the awareness, the listening. With the self-center that evaluates and judges and wants and doesn't want in abeyance, not eradicated. The traces are throughout this body. Every cell of this body is conditioned. But in abeyance, in relaxation, so that there is the perception of something that has been true all along. The fact that we're not separate entities. That our stories are thought stories, memory stories. And our attachment involves this body. So powerfully close. And with the attachment to our story, the story of my life, with that attachment and the wanting it to continue, goes the fear of not continuing, the fear of dying, which is, the fear of dying is imagined fear. Fear coming out of imagination of not continuing. And I don't know how each one of us may imagine their ending or their absence, the continuation of something beautiful, and I'm not there to enjoy it. That thought of it causes pain. And anxiety. If it is not clear at that moment that this pain and anxiety emerges out of attachment to a story, my psychological continuity. Of course, you say, wait a minute, my physical continuity too. But it's obvious to all of us that this body ages. This body may get older than that body, but eventually it dies. It's part of the flow of life. To die, to make room for the new, the fresh, like this season of the year. A season of renewal. New grasses, new flowers, new leaves, new baby animals. Human beings appear all year long. It's an incredibly gladdening season. And always, I know how you feel, always surprises me. It didn't seem possible with such winter, such coldness, such ice and snow and storm, that it could end today and the sun come out after ice and snow yesterday. Is so amazing. And we didn't do a thing about it. My sister once told me, she says, I love to garden because I do want to feel and think that I do have something to do with it, with things growing again. It gives me great pleasure. That's very minimal. Oh, we've been trying to put crocus bulbs along our border for years and haven't gotten around to it, so it's not that minimal. But well, we don't have to go into that. What does the growing? It's a total mystery. No matter how many explanations the intellect is able to furnish in its creative imagination. So, coming back once more to this, is this enough? Just to sit and let everything happen and see it, behold it all. Actually, when that really happens, that question does not occur at that moment, at that instant. It's absent because everything is totally sufficient, not spectacular, but totally sufficient unto itself. This moment is. But what happens? We already mentioned the intellect wanting to take over, do something, or speculate about it, make theories about it and predictions, and analyze it. That's one aspect of interference. The other aspect, which is very practical in our moment-to-moment relationships with each other, practical to look at, to become aware of. Somebody says something or does something, and I feel hurt. You slighted me. You disrespected me. And at that moment, the internal reaction takes over. Or does it? Does it have to take over completely? Because if it does take over, the hurt connecting with the past 50,000 hurts every time I have not been respected, hurt, humiliated, all of these past wounds coming into play, or will some attention remain in touch with what started it all? Remain in touch with the person who spoke, who said something or did something. Not lose touch with the fact that started it all. If that touch is lost, we won't hear properly anymore. We won't see accurately, because now the reaction that is stirring throughout the body distorts our perception in terms of what we're used to thinking other people do to us and so forth. But sometimes it's possible to hang in there by the skin of one's teeth, to feel the reaction that comes up, feel its physical power, and still not completely lose touch with the situation. That's a marvelous thing when that can happen. It doesn't happen very often, but one must not have any conclusions. It'll never happen anymore. It'll always be brief. Not to assume anything, but always start freshly the day. Is it possible to stay in touch with each other, even though personal reactions from the past will do their thing so quickly, so relentlessly as it seems? But if awareness is there to behold it all, then maybe what has been triggered won't last very long. It just doesn't have any momentum to it. Because awareness is a great healer of wounds by just being here now with what is happening in this moment. Maybe before we can talk of it as healing, it is interrupting or short-circuiting old circuits so that the sparks don't fly from thought to body and from body back to more thought. Seeing that may interrupt the sparking, even though whatever has been triggered is there and can be listened to in a new way, in an attentive way. And with this we come to another big topic. Fear. So many people bring up, I think there's fear underneath these thoughts. I don't want to feel fear. Try to avoid it. I've never really met it completely. So, what an opportunity to meet fear directly, fear which seems to be the generator of most of our escape actions. Because there are two ways of approaching fear. One is it possible to be unconditionally with it? Which means dropping the label fear, dropping or leaving aside all we know about it, how it feels and how it'll get worse, and how I hate it and how unbearable it is. All of those notions, which may already present themselves, see them and leave them aside. They are not the real thing. What is the real thing? This agitated, queasy, uncomfortable body. That's what most of the aversion is to feel the way one feels when there's fear. It seems so unbearable, so unpleasant. And yet, the ideas we have about it and the judgments hide and veil touching the real thing. Is that possible? You and me. Next time fear arises, to let it unconditionally reveal itself as it's operating throughout this body, and approach it without idea, without resistance, with a curious body-mind. What is it? Let's meet. It's been one's companion all one's life. One's shunned, hidden companion. So what is it really? And what keeps it going? That's a closely allied question. What keeps fear going? It may arise one thought, one waking up at night, one thought, and the body manifests this disagreeable state. And if that disagreeable state is allowed to be felt in its minutest wrinkles, then a little bit later, one will wonder, what was it all about? It has unwrinkled. The thought that triggered is gone, and no further thoughts have kept it going. But that's the best of all conditions. Usually, maybe not the same line of thought, but the body itself feeling disagreeably afraid and knowing it is afraid by labeling it, recognizing it from past fearful states. That seems to send a signal to the brain. Something is here to be afraid of. There's something dangerous in me or around me, the people. And the brain starts looking and thinking about, there's always at the fingertips, fearful, frightening, dangerous states. And thinking about them keeps this condition going or worsening. It's all there for the watching. And it is watchable, touchable, discoverable. So this is one aspect of meeting pain in a new way. I mean fear, the pain of fear. Another aspect is the question, must I be afraid now and then, often or less often, for the rest of my life? Or is it something I can get rid of? Through spiritual practice, therapies, occupation. Work, throwing myself into. Work or love, relationships. What do you say? I think I can say that as long as there is any kind of attachment to this complex body-mind, complex with story, complex with knowledge, complex with possessions, and ideas and hopes for the future, and fears of the future. As long as there is identification with that, I am that, the thought, I am that, and attachment to it, which is the physical manifestation of it. As long as there's identification and attachment, there's fear, obviously. Fear of losing what I hold dear, not continuing when I want to continue, not getting what I want, not being what I would like to be. Or if I get to be that, I may lose it again, somebody else may be better than me. You know, the whole panorama of fears connected with attachment to ourselves, to our complex selves. yet one instant of no identification with all of that, beholding it as coming and going in consciousness, in awareness. Without identification, that spark does not fly. Where is the fear? What is there to be afraid of? We are already what we were before we were born. What we will be after we die, we are that already. Vast, silent space, full of creative energy. Without identification, without need to identify. That is just a Johnny-come-lately thought process. I don't know what else in this universe identifies with itself beside human beings. Made possible by this amazingly complex brain of almost infinite possibilities. Of remembering and attaching and projecting and keeping as though it was real. When it's just figments. Castles in the air. So does thought, thinking about this, make a joyous thing out of it or a depressing thing about it? Thought can do anything. So let's be on guard with thought. It's a very necessary tool in our daily lives, but to be on guard of it, nonetheless. It doesn't ride us into depression or anger, which it does. It can. And at a moment of waking up, beholding it all without judgment. Test yourself out sometime in a retreat, or whenever it may happen. A moment of no problem, a moment of freedom, felt freedom. Which is the energy of being here. Aware, present. Not I am aware, that is not the feeling. And at that moment one won't even think of it. To bring up a fear, which usually gets the heart going. And this time it can be brought up in the imagination and it has no power. It's seen for what it is, an idea of the past or future, all created by thought. You could say, now wait a minute, what if an earthquake happens or an accident? The dam breaks and the flood waters gush over the levees. Usually, having experienced some of it myself, and other people reporting and seeing it on television with these natural disasters. Usually human beings are either in shock at a moment like this or actively engaged in doing the right thing, sandbagging or rescuing somebody, lifting some object which would be normally too heavy to lift off of somebody who's crushed underneath it. Amazing feats of energy and clarity and compassion happen to human beings in times of emergency, because the thought is not just paralyzed in fear, it's absent. The need to do things is so obvious, and the energy is aroused and responds to it very intelligently. Only later, when the emergency is over and thought floods in, oh my God, what when this happens again, or what could have happened? What if? And then the body does its thing, manifesting what we call fear, anxiety. So the right response in a moment of actual danger does not come out of fear, it comes out of the clarity of the moment. And that comes out of the energy of being present in our true whole being, where the others are us and we are the others. And the crows. We will end here for today.